I'm just going to explain a little bit about the Leaders Award if you've not heard about it, if you want to know what it's about. So its main aim is to inspire young people ages 3 to 19 to look at the world around them and design solutions to problems. This can be a small problem such as brushing your teeth to a big worldwide problem like we are experiencing now, and see if you can design an invention to solve that problem. We provide opportunities for you to meet and interview engineering professionals, just like we're doing today, to inspire you to think of some ideas and start designing your own inventions. And we've also got some available resources on our website at leadersaward.com that will help you do this. Our suggestion is you make this into a weekly challenge. So you're interviewing different professionals every week and looking for a different problem to solve every week that you'd like to solve and design an invention for. Just before you all then head back to school, make sure you choose your favorite invention that you've come up with during lockdown, and then take this into school where our engineering professionals can then read and grade. We've also launched our newest project, which is the Stat Wars Climate Change in Film and TV project. We did this on Friday, and this project asks young learners to work in small teams to use data skills to identify 3 changes they can personally commit to in their daily lives as well. We've been releasing incredible short videos from data professionals and advertising data professional interviews similar to these ones that we are running now. So please follow our social media channels to see these. Now, without further ado, I'm going to pass over to David, who, as I mentioned before, is a civil and track engineer at Network Rail. Hi, David.
Hello, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm brilliant. Thank you. You okay, David?
Yes. I assume you can hear me nice and loud.
Yes, I can hear you. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen now, and I think you should be able to share yours.
I should be able to, and let's see if it works.
Yeah, I can see it coming up now, which is perfect. Yeah,
Marvelous.
brilliant. It's full screen now. Thanks, David.
Brilliant. Hello, everyone. I assume we're having a lovely day in this. It is raining again, so it's lovely. So I'm David Chubb. I'm a graduate engineer in civil and track at Network Rail, and because quite a lot of people think I'm a lot older because I'm a beard and the bald head, I am only 25, so I haven't been around that long. And having only graduated at 22, so it's so very short amount of time, but within the amount of time I've been an engineer, I've been involved in lots of exciting stuff. So the first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to put in either the Q&A or the chat function. I want someone to pick me a picture. Any of the pictures that are on the screen.
Yeah, so like David said, if you could put it into the chat section or the Q&A section if you want to pick a picture. So type in which picture you would like David to talk about. So we've got here, it's the shard we got from Tavindu and Lukindu. If you would like to talk about the shard, David.
So the shard, not specifically the shards, however, it's a very gorgeous building, but architecture in general. When I was around about in year 8 or year 9, I realized that I quite liked how buildings looked and how the world looked around and all the rest of it. So I started to get interested in architecture, and it took me until it was about year 10, and we had a family friend who was a civil engineer studying at Imperial University, and he turned around and he said, right, do you like how a building looks? Yes. Do you like to know how a building stands up? Yes. Become a civil engineer. Civil engineers tend to be are involved in every single major piece of infrastructure that you'll see built around the world. And architects are generally not involved in a lot of those things. So as a civil engineer, you'll always be involved in something, whereas an architect you won't necessarily. And so therefore, he turned around and he went, "Go and become a civil engineer." And I heeded his advice. Right, another picture.
Next one we've got from Matthew is the lake and mountain.
Lake and mountain. I go hiking quite a lot. It is a wonderful recreational activity. It's particularly frustrating at the moment with lockdown that I haven't been able to go and enjoy all the nice weather whilst going off and hiking. It's incredibly important to remember the the things that we all enjoy and love in our life. As much as I enjoy the built environment, I very much enjoy the open outdoors as well. Another picture.
Next one we've got from Claire and Jacob is the clock tower.
The clock tower. Now, if I was doing this in person, I'd be asking if anyone knew its name. That clock tower is Old Joe, or the Joseph Chamberlain Memorial Tower. It is the tallest freestanding clock tower in the world, and it is at University of Birmingham, which is where I went to study my master's in civil engineering with industrial experience. Birmingham has is the centre for railway research in the UK, and a lot of good memories were had at Birmingham. A note with universities, and a lot of people that on this call won't be thinking about them yet, but if we do end up getting to that position of wanting to go and study at university, my one piece of advice I would give to everyone is don't pick a university based on the course necessarily. Obviously have a list of the good universities. Pick a university based on the university. If you feel that you'd get along there and you like it there, it's probably better, because you might start doing your course and realize, I don't enjoy this subject, I'd like to do something else, at which point it's a lot easier to switch course in the university than it is to switch universities. Number 4 picture.
Next one we've got Tavindu again. So family, they wanted to talk about.
Family. So my family is incredibly paramount to me as a person. It is incredibly important to remember, when you're at work, when you're in your personal life at all, the importance that your family and your friends have had in shaping who you are. So when I am at work, it's one of the more important things to remember when you're talking to your colleagues is a lot of the things that you've learned from your family actually come into play there. Learning how to not put other ideas down, be open to other things that everyone says, but also to remember that there isn't necessarily that ideas can come from anywhere. Another picture.
So next one's from Peter, and it says anonymous attendee, so I'm not sure who's wrote this one, but they both said motorway, David.
The motorway. So before I went to university, I did a year in industry. So during my year in industry, I went to a company called URS in Chesterfield, and I was put in their major highways department. It was inadvertently the absolute perfect position for me to be in. I never quite realised it, but whilst I loved the world around me and buildings, I in particularly loved transport networks. I have a systems brain. I like seeing how things get from A to B in a mass system. So I worked on the M6, the M4, and the M1 smart motorway scheme during that year in industry, with most of my work being on the M4. If anybody drives down the M4 and it's flooding, that's not my fault. I only did the preliminary design for the drainage down that section. But there are a wide range of things that you can do as a civil engineer, and this was one of the most important things that I learned was, we do roads. And the moment I learned that, you start to learn about the whole world. It's way more than just buildings and bridges. Another picture, please.
Brilliant. Next one from Sukrit, which I would also ask about this one as well. I think it's quite interesting, is the F1 car.
So I have loved cars since I was a child, and in particular F1. And well, that was my favorite year of F1 because my favorite driver won. But racing and all that sort of thing, it was half the thing that triggered my interest in engineering. So whilst I was at school in year 10 and 11, I took part in the Green Kart Challenge, where you had to design and build your own mini electric go-kart. Our highest result was second when I was driving. I felt so chuffed about that. And that was brilliant because it taught me about how to work in a group, how to do things and ideas, and also just a general idea of how to build things. As a civil engineer, we do a lot of concrete and cement and stone and stuff like that. Actually doing that meant I've actually got a little bit of knowledge about how to wire stuff together. Another picture, please.
The next one we've got is from Oscar, the railway tracks.
Railway tracks. So the railway tracks link far more into what I do now. So I now work in Network Rail, who are the infrastructure owner for all the railway in all the national rail network in the UK. And they sponsored me through university. So it's one of the things that I would like to recommend to people when they do get through to that part is have a look round for anything that anyone support. Go and look for sponsorships or something along those lines. They really do help. So for Network Rail picked me up after I did my year in industry with URS, and I worked for them every single summer. My dissertation at university was in ballast. So dissertation being a nice independent research report that you do by yourself, big scary thing, and I decided to do it in the stones that are beneath the railway, that are beneath the rail. So if you look at that picture there, you'll see the two rails that the train sits on, that sits on the sleepers, that's a place like that, and on top, underneath that is the ballast. It is not very well understood, and it's an absolutely amazing area to go and do some research in. And I never thought I would until I got to my fourth year, and my supervisor turned around to me and said, "Hey, this thing that's really interesting." And I went, "Ooh, that is really interesting." It's interesting because whilst we build it's basically a one long foundation is the railway, and whilst we know a lot about how to build structural foundations, the difference between structures and trains is structures tend to stay still, whereas trains tend to move. And the problem is, as a train goes along, it starts doing that. Obviously, that's exaggerated. So a train goes along and it bashes along, so you get a dynamic load. And dynamic loads on soil is not very well understood. And ballast, which is stone, is basically is a type of soil. Not that you need to understand that. Another picture.
Just for those who may have just joined us, what David is asking you, sorry, is that you choose a picture on the slide and then type it into the chat section, which one you would like him to talk about. So the next one we've got from Tavindu and Likindu is the pie.
The pie. That's cherry bakewell. It is a type of it is a type of pastry, and this is my favourite. I can't have it anymore because I became allergic to nuts around the age of 20, and it has almonds in it. I am a keen, avid amateur baker. It's one of the key things it's very important to remember through all of this is that what you do should not define you. I take a lot of interest in my baking, as does my fiance, who is far better than me. And it's a thing that takes a lot of my interest outside of work as well, and is absolute paramount in actually doing well. If you have interests if you have lots and lots and lots of interests, it is always useful to go and venture them. Another picture, please. I think there's only a few left.
We've got one on Facebook here from Jess. If you could talk about the map.
The map. So this is where I'm from. That is an old railway map. So it's kind of embodying two things. First of all, the importance of history. When we're working on trying to work out which bridges we knock down or don't knock
Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me? I think we have just lost David for a second. Good. I thought it was my connection. I think David's connection's just gone a little bit. I'll just make sure he can join us again. Just wait a second. Hi, everyone. Yeah, David's internet just went down. I've just spoke to him. He's just coming back on now. Just to answer Sebastian's question, how do we get involved in the engineering challenges? Our competition, the Leaders Award competition, if you go to the website, leadersaward.com, you can find all the information about it there with all the different resources that you can use on there. Hope that helps. Hi, David. Have we got you back?
Hi, can you hear me again?
Yeah, brilliant. There we go.
Brilliant. If you can enable me to share my screen
there
again.
we go. There we go. I think should be able to now.
Right, brilliant. That's hopefully the mobile phone network doesn't let us down. So where were we? We were on the map, weren't we?
Yes, we were talking about the map.
So yes, so at the moment I'm working on a section of railway between Wigan and Bolton, and on it we're trying to work out what we should do to different bridges along the section and what should we do with the track. And one of the bridges has 4 spans, so it goes like that and has multiple piers over it. And one of the bridge right next to it, which was a lot newer, only has 1, and it only goes over the railway. It's very important to understand why that was the case, and the reason that was the case is because we used to have a lot more railway in that part of the country. So what that map there is showing is actually the section of railway that used to exist around the area I'm from, which is Stoke-on-Trent. And there is a lot less railway in the area than there is now, but it's incredibly important to understand how we got to what we got now, because if we don't understand that, then you start making, then things jump up and shock you. But the area I'm from, which is from Stoke, which is Stoke, is also incredibly integral to who I became as a person. I always think it's important to go around and see the world, but also never forget what you learnt whilst you're at home. And what I learnt whilst I was growing up in Stoke was a lot about how communities can come together, but also about how different areas can respond to different things during life. I think there's 2 more photos on there that we haven't done, so I'll just very quickly go through them now. So one of them is the giraffe playing a trombone. The giraffe playing a trombone references the fact I'm a musician. But when I was in about year 10, I made the active decision to not follow the life as a musician and follow the life as an engineer. It was partially because I didn't have the desire to do enough practice to be a musician, but it's still an incredibly important part of my life now. Without it, I would not be where I am now, and I also wouldn't have quite the ability to think in a 3D space without it as well, because that trained me very well. And then the absolute one, I think the most important thing on here is the smiley ball. Smiley ball is in effect, my philosophy in life that I established when I was in around about year 9 and year 10, which was to be happy. All of the decisions that I have made in my life have been, will this ultimately make me happy? So making my friend and making sure that other people are happy makes me happy. I enjoy engineering, therefore I can go and do engineering, and doing engineering will make me happy. I enjoy playing the trombone and playing the piano, so I'm going to go and do that. It's important to not forget that. I forgot that for about a few years ago, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't enjoy what the decisions I was making and where I was going and what I was trying to do. A lot of people get carried away in trying to progress in their career, get to the top of the ladder and all the rest of it. And I sat there and went, you know what? There is a limit to how high I would ever want to go in any company. It's simply because I want to be an engineer, and if those priorities change as I go along, then good. But for the most part, I like being an engineer. I want to be an engineer, and so my decisions in where I go and what jobs I take and where I go and what I look at will be guided by that idea of my key happiness. It's important to remember that and not forget that. The A levels that you take, any GCSEs you do, any A levels you take, um, or any apprenticeships that you take, all should be around that idea of, actually, are you happy? Because if you are happy, then I personally class that as being successful. So that's who I am, how I got to where I am, and a bit about me. And will it let me go next? Yes, it will. So
Oh, I think we may have just lost David again. Let me just double check and see if he can come back. Apologise to those watching. I'm sorry, the internet must be bad today. Oh, David, are you back now?
I should be back. Yes.
Yeah, you got me better now.
Hopefully it doesn't drop out. And the mobile network dropped out of me, which I thought was going to be the more reliable thing. So does anybody know in which city this picture was taken?
We'll just wait for those answers to come in. If you could just use the chat facility or the Q&A facility. So we've got quite a few coming through. Claire, Sebastian, we've got Tavindu and Likindu saying London.
Any others out there? Or is it pretty much good consensus? There is a bit of a giveaway in the fact Tower Bridge is in the background. Yes, and London Tower is in the background as well. So yeah, no, this is London. And this station here is London Bridge Station. Now, London Bridge Station looks really, really, really nice now, but it didn't a few years ago. So I'm going to ask a question to all of you. So London Bridge Station, if you look here on the left, was originally 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 terminus platforms with 6 through platforms. So the difference being, a terminus platform is where you go in and you go out the same way, whereas a through platform is somewhere where you can keep going in the same direction out the other side. Now, the advantage of keeping on going through the other side is actually that you don't have to go back towards a train that's coming towards you. So you can actually get more trains through and through the station. Now, we wanted to take it from 9 terminus to 6 through to 6 terminus and 9 through. And the reason for that was because we were in the middle of building something called Thameslink. Thameslink is a railway line that got improved, and it goes all the way through the middle of London from the north to the south. And it goes through, and the route goes through this station. Now, all the work that was being done on Thameslink was to get more trains through, to get more and more and more trains to go through, which means that we need more platforms so we can have a train in the platform whilst another train is coming towards, because we don't like our trains crashing into each other. So here we are, and so the problem that I've got here is London Bridge is the third most used station in the UK. Just under, I think it's about 12 million people use it a year, something along those lines. A lot of people use it a year, every year. And especially now it sits under the Shard, which is not only a very large office area, but also a tourist hotspot as well. So we've got a few problems. We need to build this brand new station in the same place as the old station and still run trains. So this is a bit of a challenge to you, and I want you to ask me some questions, and there's no wrong question, but I want you to ask me some questions about what am I going to do about it? So I want you to ask things like, how are you going to make sure that people can still use it? How did you move the platforms about? And things like that. Just use your imagination. Ask me how to build. Ask me questions about elements of how I would build that station. Again, use the chat and the Q&A function.
Yes, I feel that's a really good topic to kind of ask about, and a really interesting subject to ask about. So like David said, we'll just wait for those questions to come in on the Q&A section. So Claire and Jacob are asking, how did you take the buildings apart?
So this is actually quite interesting. So London Bridge, before I carry on, I should mention, I didn't work on London Bridge Station. This was done just before I was working, but my supervisor is someone who did work on it. So I know a lot about this because of that. And it's really interesting, a good example of engineering examples. So how do you take them about? So London Bridge, the reason that it is so weird in the fact it's got these terminus platforms and these through platforms was in fact two stations. So it was built by two separate companies back in the 1800s. And you've got this quite a lot around the whole of the UK rail network, where you have different companies building rail lines through a similar section, but build their stations in completely different ways because they're doing different things. So the problem we had is we have two stations that, when they were first built, were built at different times. They were built 20 years apart from each other. You then had it refurbished, so it was updated, made to look nice again in the 1950s, where one part of where they added in footbridges. So we're dealing with lots of different materials, and then obviously it had to be re-updated again in 2015 and 16. So underneath it are a bunch of brick arches. So the problem with brick arches are really useful. That's what a lot of houses are made out of, is brick. You've seen many, I assume you've seen it, lots of brick walls. You can knock them down. The problem was a lot of these were listed. So when we say listed, what we mean is that they are protected. These are arches that are really important, and we don't want you to knock them down. We want you to try and keep them. So first off, you've now got to deal with this really old arch that's about 150 years old, lots and lots and lots of them, that we don't necessarily know what's behind them. So that's one of the problems. So one of the major risks with construction is when you demolish something, you're not always, or build into something, if you don't know what's there, you have to make an assumption. So you have to go, I think this, and this is why I think this. So a lot of it is going, I am stating this because I have evidence behind it. So with these arches, one of the problems that we had was they were built at different times, because these stations, as they needed to be bigger for the trains back in the 1900s, they made them wider. But each time they made them wider, they built them in a slightly different way, because as time went on, the Victorians and engineers over the years have learnt how to build things better. So the problem that we had was we had four different types. The problem that you have is four different types of construction underneath there. So you had to knock different things at different times down. So the second problem is, on top of that, we have the actual platforms and the newer construction. So the newer construction was generally concrete and steel. Steel being metal and concrete being the stuff that you quite often see on the floor. Now, the problem is that we also had something called asbestos. Now, asbestos is really poisonous. It's not very good for us. We don't want to breathe it in. So actually, that's where the difficulty comes. Steel's really easy to take apart because it's held together with nuts and bolts. So you can take it down a bit like a Lego or a Meccano set. And similar with concrete. Concrete, especially when it was built in more recently, is generally built in parts, so you're able to take it down more easily. But it was the asbestos that gets in the way, and the asbestos was generally on the roof. So you have all these huge problems, and then on top of that, now that's what normal demolition has to deal with. The biggest problem we have here is the fact that we have trains running, and I'm going to wait for someone to ask me more questions before I carry on.
Yeah, so the next one we've got from Tavindu Alikindu is, how do trains come in whilst you have construction vehicles there?
So this is one of the things that we constantly have to deal with on the railway, not just on big projects like this, but just in whenever we're doing any work. Trains are dangerous. Trains are big, heavy things going very fast. So one of the problems we have when we work on the railways, we have to separate our humans from our trains. So one of the ways in which we do that is we block the railway at either side, and we say trains cannot run down here. So trains cannot be routed down that route. However, even if I've got four lines like this and I shut these two, I've still got people here, and you can be quite close. So we have rules about how close people can be. So how close people can be, it varies. But so one of the ways that you do it is you build a temporary wall or a temporary barrier, and you bring in rules about where things can go. So that's how you deal with the safety aspect, simply. Now, how do you make the trains run? So one of the problems that you have is to build this really quickly, like you see with lots of tall buildings, because tall buildings tend to go up really quickly. The problem that you have is that if we were to try and build it really quickly and all in one go, we have to shut the station. Now, if anyone who is listening in is from Derby or around Derby, you'll know that that's something that Network Rail did last year and the year before, was they shut Derby Station. They shut Derby Station because actually you couldn't build what they needed to build with what was there. It was far too complicated, and actually the resulting design that you would have at the end, the design of how it should look, would have to be changed in order to make it buildable, so you could actually make the thing whilst the trains are running. So they made the decision there many, many, many years ago to shut it for a few months. Now, London Bridge, that wasn't an option. London Bridge, being the third most used station in the UK, could not be shut. So what they did instead was they closed platforms. So you close a platform and then knock that section down and build a new section where it is. And then what you do is you then, over a weekend maybe, or over a week, you shut the station entirely. So you can tie that into what is there at the moment. And then what you do is you tie that in, and then you start demolishing the next section. And you keep doing that. So that's how they did it at London Bridge. So one of the difficult bits with London Bridge in particular was the fact that the current platforms were not wide enough, and also had a lot of curve. So one of the problems with curve on trains is a train tends to be straight, and you have doors here and here. If you have a curve in a platform, and I'm sure anyone that has gotten on a train on the London Underground will be aware, or anyone that's gotten on a train on the rest of the UK, will find that if you're on a curve, the step is a lot further away from the platform edge than if it was straight. Because if you have something straight against something straight, you can get those two quite close together. But the moment you have something curved like that, you suddenly have a problem that you can't actually get as close. So one of the problems that London Bridge had was that they also had to change how the platforms were shaped. So this was a bit more difficult because it meant you actually had to knock more down as you were going along than in other things. So another question?
So the next one we've got here, David, is from Peter. I think you've kind of touched on this a little bit already, but what are the best materials to use that you did use?
So this is an interesting one. Actually, Peter, in 10 either side and you push down on it
Sorry,
and it
David,
bends.
your internet just went off a little bit then. Would you be able to start that again, if that's okay? Very sorry again, everyone. We're just having a little bit of trouble with the internet again. Oh, hi, David.
I'm back again. I
There we
don't know
go.
what happened there. I do apologize. I will carry on where I
Don't worry.
left off.
Yeah, don't worry. It's been a bit funny, I think, for everyone this morning, this afternoon, sorry, shall I say. Yeah, so it's just about the materials.
Yes, so steel is very good at certain things. Concrete is really good when you push on it really hard. This is why it's generally on the floor. And then you obviously have brick walls, and you have wood and timber, and there's quite a few other materials, but those are the main materials that are out there. Now, the problem with using timber is you have to knock a lot of things down, and also it generally isn't as good as steel at being able to take lots and lots of force, lots and lots of weight. So you have that, but also with this we have a lot of brick in there as well. So we already have brick viaducts in there. So one of the things that we will want to do is to try and keep with the aesthetic, so make it look the same. So the lower half was generally built with concrete walls and was built on a very large concrete support. The reason for this was because the amount concrete requires much less carbon dioxide to produce than steel once you have to get a lot of it. So the problem with this is it was a really big area, so having a lot of steel wasn't going to work. So a lot of concrete was used instead. But how you choose these materials are really important because different materials require different things to be made. So one of the problems we have with steel is you need to burn a lot of coal to make steel. Now, coal is not very good for the environment in burning. It puts a lot of carbon dioxide into the air, and we don't want to do that. But the problem we have with concrete is concrete, when it reacts and also when it's made, also puts a lot of carbon dioxide into the air. So you have all these problems where actually, if I did use timber, would that work? But the problem with using timber or wood is that I wouldn't then be able to have a nice large space to be able to take all the people. So actually, I'd be making my design not very good in order to facilitate things. So the problem we have is that railway is the most efficient form of travel in terms of how much energy it needs, which means if you make the energy more efficient, the less carbon dioxide that is needed to be put into the atmosphere to make it go. So you have to take all of these things into consideration when choosing the materials. Have you got any more questions in there?
Yes, yes, David, we have one from Sebastian. So, how did you ensure efficient links between the platforms?
So when you're building all these things separately, you actually have a bit of difficulty in trying to link them all together. So obviously, as I said, you build them in stages as you go along. So in trying to make sure that people are still able to move around, that's how it makes it even more difficult to get your staging, as it's called, correct. So you have, so not only were we doing it with the platforms, but you also had to do it underneath as well. So you have to keep the people separate from the work site in the same way that trains are dangerous, work sites are dangerous. So you don't want anybody walking around where you're building something. So any time that you had to build something, you had to work out where are the materials going to come from, where are the workers going to come from, how am I going to get them to where they need to be built, and how am I going to make sure that that doesn't go across where we have pedestrians and the public. Any more?
Yes, we've got one here from Tabindu and Lakindu again. So, what happens if you accidentally knock down the foundation of the wrong section, and could that then collapse onto a running train at all, David?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes, and that's why you don't do it. So the way you don't do it is you assess the structure. So you go up to it, you go, I know how big it is, I know whether it's kind of it's falling down a little bit, or whether it's really good, it's brand new, and all that sort of thing. You then run some structural calculations and you go, aha, I know that that will stand up if I take away the thing that's next to it. Or, which is more common, it won't stand up. So if it won't stand up, what do I do? So you can have bracing systems in there. You can put in some form of wall system, some form of extra support structure. That is something we call a temporary structure. And you put that in as you take away all the other stuff. And then when you put it back, you can take that out and it will all work. There's a lot of complex maths that go into working all of that out. And a lot of scientific engineering principles that go into working that out. Engineering, you're trying your best to gain as much information as you can. However, you will not always be able to get everything to perfection in terms of the information you know. So quite often you will find that engineers work in bands of engineers would quite often multiply the numbers they get, so to make them bigger or smaller depending on how you're looking at it, to make it so that actually I think it's that, but I'm going to add a safety factor so it's up here to make sure of that fact. The more information you know, the less that safety factor can be, and the more efficient you can design. I think I'll move on to the next section very quickly, just because I'm aware of what time it is. Oh, will it let me do the next slide, please? I won't do that video. So I think that's the end of my presentation. I've got a bit of a question here that's for the very studious of you can take away. This is the basis of what a lot of engineers have to do, and the basis of engineering decision making. And it is something which actually you can apply to all aspects of your life and how you make your decisions and all the rest of it. So I've got to build a railway between two cities. At the moment, it takes 2 hours and 20 minutes on the train. But if I take the car, it's only 2 hours and 25 minutes. So it's not, so people are kind of like going, yeah, but I'll just drive instead of go by train. And as we know, that will pollute the environment. It is not the most efficient way of moving people from point A to point B. So what should we do? Well, I've given you 3 different options there. And I've given you how long the journey would take if you built that option, how much it would cost to build the option, But on top of that, some other factors, such as actually how many houses would you have to knock down to do that? And actually, if we knock those houses, and actually we have a nice big nature reserve between these two cities. So one of them goes through it. Is that the right idea? So if you take that away, go and have a look at it. There's no right answer. And you've just got to be able to come back and go, this is why. There's definitely no right answer. Every time that I've ever done this, there's never been one consensus. But this is actually the reality of engineering, is there is never one right answer. There's lots of right answers. You just have to find the one that's most right. So I think I am quite happy to move into the, I'll leave that up there. I'm quite happy to move into the Q&A session of the
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, David. Thank you for your amazing presentation there. I think it was brilliant how we were able to kind of, you were able to ask questions and people were answering. So I really enjoyed that aspect of it then. We've got a few questions that have come through. The first one here is asking, what was your favorite subject at school?
It wasn't maths, it was geography. I really love geography, and geography is actually incredibly important to everything that you do as an engineer, especially human geography. Understanding why people go from A to B, why people are in different areas. If I do this, what will that mean? So the problems that you quite often have with level crossings, for example, don't play around with level crossings, but actually, if I put something in this location, what will that do? Will it mean anything? Will people pay attention to it and stuff like that? And also, I'm a track engineer as well as a civil engineer, and one of the things I mentioned earlier about the whole soil thing, geography and geology is paramount to understanding that. So actually, no, my favorite subject at school was geography, not maths. It took me a really long time to like maths. Maths is good fun once you get into it at university level, because that's when it gets really interesting.
I think you mentioned about different hobbies that you have as well, David. Matthew's asking, what was the best thing you did at university that wasn't studying?
I was president of the hiking society at university. So at university, there were lots of societies that were there that all do different activities. So you have some which are all about doing dance, some which are music, some which are actually maths, some which are games and Doctor Who and stuff like that. And I was, and the best thing that I did when I was there was I ran the hiking society at university, and that was really useful because you have to learn a lot about how to talk to people. You have to learn about how you manage things. A lot of engineering is managing how people work together and all the rest of it. So it's that was one of the best things that I did. It's also the most fun.
We've got the next one here. What is your favorite building?
Ooh, building.
It's putting you on the spot a little bit, that question, I think.
I have a favorite bridge, so I'll answer that one. My favorite bridge has to be the Forth Rail Bridge in Scotland over the Firth of Forth. The things that bridge has to deal with from the weather is unbelievable, and the span which it had to cross is just incredibly amazing. Building, you'll have to. I'll come back to you on that one. I haven't got a favorite building. I don't think there's quite a few of them. I think there's quite a few of them. I think the Guggenheim Museum, I think, is great. I think the Sydney Opera House is amazing just because of what it was able to do with concrete. The amount of progress that building pushed in how to build with concrete was amazing, because the shells at the Sydney Opera House, they're concrete, and up to that point, everyone's response was, nope, you can't do that, you can't build that, and so on and so forth. So yeah, no, I think yeah. Another question?
I'm guessing you're working at home at the moment, David. How are you finding that?
Very easy, actually. A lot of engineering is talking to other people, discussing ideas, and that would have been difficult a few years ago, but now it's actually not too bad. We have the ability to talk like we are now, and actually, with the situation we're in at the moment, we've been forced into doing it and adapting to it, and actually that's been really useful because uh, actually it means that we now know how to do it because we didn't have any other opportunity to not do it. So it's there are still some meetings where you have a lot of drawings, a lot of pieces of information that you need all at the same time, which can't really be done online. But actually, when we do come out the other end, it means there's going to be far fewer let's travel across the country to talk to another engineer about this one thing for 2 hours.
We've got a good question here from Peter now. I don't know about yourself, David, but I've been doing a lot of quizzes whilst in lockdown and things like that. So Peter's asking, do you have a favourite bit of trivia? I'm guessing that's about kind of the railway.
Far too many. What is the busiest train station in the UK in terms of passenger numbers is London Waterloo, but in terms of trains is Clapham Junction, because virtually all the trains that come out of Waterloo and Victoria in London have to go via Clapham Junction. I can't remember. I think is it Scunthorpe? Is it Scunthorpe or Scarborough has the longest bench in the UK. It's one continuous bench. It goes the whole way down the platform, and I cannot tell you how long that is. You're going to have to go and look that one up. Yeah, there's far too many, but none of them are coming to mind. I can't remember. Oh yes, how long Ribblehead Viaduct is. Go and look at how long Ribblehead Viaduct is. I can't remember off the top of my head, which is shocking, really. But Ribblehead Viaduct was a mad idea. In the Victorian era, what happened was a lot of train companies were trying to build the fastest route to Scotland from London because Glasgow was the second city at that point, and there was a lot of people wanted to go from Glasgow to Glasgow from London. So a lot of train companies were trying to build, and the problem you have is there's something called the Yorkshire Dales, the Peak District, and Cumbria in the way, and so there's lots of different ways that you could do it. And what they decided, and one of the companies decided that they were going to build between Settle and Carlisle, and unfortunately there was a massive valley in the way, so they built the longest viaduct in the world, brick viaduct in the world.
I think it's incredible how what things kind of stick in your mind, isn't it, David? Sometimes, and I bet you're hearing things all the time working on the railway as well, and all bits of trivia as well coming across it. We've got another one here from Tavindu. So, what was your latest project, or what have you been working on?
I'm currently working on 4 things at the moment. I'm currently working on the Northwest Electrification Project at Phase 7, which is trying to electrify the railway between Wigan and Lostock, which is next to Bolton. I'm currently working on trying to extend the platforms around the entire Merseyrail area. So the Merseyrail is in effect a London Underground in Liverpool and Merseyside area, and they've got new trains coming next year. So we're currently trying to make those wider. I'm also currently working on Northern Powerhouse Railway. So we're currently trying to make a lot of fast railway lines around the UK. So one of the problems that we have is that at the moment where I am in Stoke, I can get to London in the same amount of time as it takes someone to get from Manchester to Birmingham. And that's about 75, 80 miles further. So, and also Leeds to Manchester is really slow, York to Manchester, all of those really slow. So trying to work on how to make trains go faster. And the 4th one is we're just finishing, so I'm helping finish it up, and it's all about CAF gauging. So brand new trains are currently running on the Northern network. So they got brand new trains that came in, and the project was to make them fit The problem that you have is when you have a new train, it's a different size to another train, and we're not getting into why that happens. But it means that we have to chisel a bit out here or move a few bits of end of platforms so they can fit and people can also step on and off the train. I joined that after all the work had been done, but it's really important to remember it doesn't finish the moment you put the last brick in. You still have to make sure that it was built the way it was meant to be built. You have to make sure that all the designs, all the drawings, all the construction stuff is in the folder ready for people to take. And you also need to be able to turn around to the client and go, you told us to build X, Y, and Z, and we have built X, Y, and Z. So those are the 4 projects that I'm currently working on. If you join the railway, you'll never be without a job. I think it's the general rule of thumb.
I think we've got a really nice question to end on here, David, from Sukri. He's just asking, have you ever dreamed to work abroad, or have you worked abroad at all?
Yes and no. So up until about a year and a half ago, I'd never really thought about working abroad. The reason being is that our railway, believe it or not, is one of the best in the world. As much as our media may say it isn't, a lot of the rest of the world look to us for how to keep something that's really old running so efficiently, and also how to have trains run this close to each other. So first off, the UK is quite close to cutting edge technology. But about a year and a half ago, an opportunity came on my doorstep to go and work in the US. I didn't get it, unfortunately. But at that point, it was actually, this would be really interesting, because you have to go and learn what sort of problems other people have experienced and what other problems that they have to deal with. And actually, in doing that, you also learn about the fact that, hang on, we don't have that problem. Why don't we have that problem? Okay, we don't have the problem because we already solved it by doing this. And you suddenly realize that this thing that you might have been doing that you thought was for fixing this was also fixing something else you hadn't even thought of, because it was so far down the ladder that, yeah. But yeah, no, as an engineer, you can work anywhere in the world. Everywhere needs engineers, and actually, especially with railway engineers, there's a lot of railway being built around the world, learning from our mistakes in how to not build a railway. It's you generally want it to be straight, and I think the West Coast Main Line from London to Glasgow is 80% curve, which is interesting considering it's one of the fastest lines in the UK. That's why we have trains that tilt so they can go around the corners faster. So yeah, yes, it's definitely a thing that is definitely an opportunity if you choose to be an engineer when you're older.
I just want to say a big thank you to you, David, for taking time out of your day to do this for us. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else enjoyed it as well and asking their questions. I want to say a big thank you to those who have sent their questions in as well. I think David will agree they've been amazing, and we've had some really good participation there as well. We have put an online survey into the chat as well, if everyone could complete that after the interview has finished. I hope you've all been inspired to take on the Leaders Award competition now, and you can start designing and using our resources on our website at leadersaward.com. We've also got some upcoming interviews, and not just for Leaders Award, but tomorrow we have an interview for our Stat Wars film and TV project involving Jane Hunt, who is a global head of video production, and we'll be talking about why we watch TV. So just once again, thank you very much, David. Thank you for joining us today. I think we'll end it there. Do you have anything to say at all, David, there at the end?
Other than thank you everyone for your questions. They were very good questions. As I said, have a think about what it is. Engineering thought, engineering logic is the key to good decision making. You have scientific method, and you apply scientific method at the end. You take that result and you apply engineering logic to it, and you generally come out with a very good solution. So it's a really good thing to go and study and learn about. And thank you everyone for being such a brilliant audience. And I hope you do carry on with the Leaders Award, because things like this are really invaluable at spreading your wings, at learning how to think outside the box. And that's something which you can't be taught. It's something you have to learn by yourself, by making mistakes and thinking through problems. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, David. Bye, everyone.